All right, so today we've got a very special guest on the channel. Uh, we've got James Showalter here to talk about the 18K PV, the release of the Flexboss inverter, the GridBoss microgrid interconnect device. James is the founder of Signature Solar and EG4 Electronics, both distributors of solar and storage equipment and a developer of solar and storage products. He has set up the first dealer-based North American board of certified energy practitioners training facility in Sulphur Springs, Texas. He performs charity work at both home and abroad on projects such as off-grid water wells, hospitals, orphanages. The overarching theme of his work that I've seen is to make solar and storage affordable and attainable to the masses. James, thanks so much for your time, the opportunity to have you on the channel. Sincerely an honor. Tell us a little bit more about your background and how you got started in the industry.
Yeah, thank you so much for your time too, Graham. It's really cool to have just kind of the professional background that you bring to these conversations, in hardware conversations. My own background, before I started Signature Solar and EG4 Electronics, I was actually the youngest installer in the state of Texas in 2015 when I was 19. I started an operation. We had to bring on a master electrician, obviously, because no one can have a master license at 19. I took about 3 or 4 of my knuckleheaded brothers and made a small crew. We were based just outside of Dallas, Hopkins County area. And then that operation turned into a company called Signatech Solar, which my younger brother Adam took over and runs today. Obviously, the naming convention was very original from his other brother's company. But I started that operation. We tried to make solar work in an area where the power company got rid of net metering in 2016. The energy rates are very low. It's 13 cents, 12 cents, 14 cents. So highly competitive, and where everyone who is going to put a battery on the house wants backup. So you had to put a battery in for self-consumption when push came to shove for us. And then ultimately, people who wanted batteries wanted backup. And we just saw this massive disconnect with the hardware guys in the industry. And also, on the way up, building a long tail installer in a remote area, we really found how hard it was to get distribution companies to work with new entrant installers. I mean, we're in a town of 17,000, counties 40,000. I mean, there's a lot of business to do here if you've got a solution that everyone likes. And of course, the surrounding areas, we might serve 200,000 people in an area that no one has served. But, just the persona non grata that you get in the industry, starting a long tail company. And that was just an aspect of, I had to get all these different parts from all over the United States, from different people, and wrangle deals. And I was like, I wish there was just a one-stop place that you could start as a do-it-yourselfer and end up as a long tail installer or a medium tail installer. And that's kind of what Signature Solar was. And then very quickly, as a distributor, I looked around, and none of the hardware companies were going to get honest on their lithium prices fast enough 5 years ago. And so we decided to, we did enough homework to realize the kind of quality LFP solutions that were out there that were validated and verified internationally. And we were like, let's go and bring a product to market that makes cost-effective lithium possible, because that's the holy grail of attacking the problems that we had in our installation area. So I left installs in 2019 after about 4.5 years, and started the distribution company and EG4 Electronics. And we released our first battery at EG4 Electronics mid-year 2020.
Yeah, it's amazing to see how far things have come since 2020 in such a short period of time. Great. Well, yeah, and for those, I'm kind of a new channel. A lot of people watching may not know about me, so I'll kind of give a little bit of my background. I've been in the solar industry about 14 years. I'm a NABCEP certified PV installation professional, a licensed electrician of the unlimited certification in the state of North Carolina. And when I kind of started out, we were just doing like solar hot water panels and radiant heating. At that time, PV was just really pretty expensive. When we started really getting into the PV, we were doing a lot of string inverters like SMA, Fronius, things like that. installed a handful of like Schneider, Xantrax, some Outback systems, but we were never really profitable with those systems. And so the company I was working for at that time, we had net metering here in North Carolina under Duke Energy at that time, and they just made the decision, hey, we're just not going to do batteries anymore. Let's just do net metering, grid tied PV. And we got on the Solar Edge train. And really, we went from just a small handful of guys to a profitable business and started growing and making money, just doing standard Solar Edge PV. We slowly worked into those Solar Edge storage inverters. They had like the little 40 amp critical loads panel, everything passed through the inverter, a little separate neutral forming transformer. But you couldn't really give the customer what they wanted. People don't want a little tiny sub panel. They want to back up their home with batteries. So that was always kind of a shame. And then, we really just when we first got into Tesla Powerwall 2s, that's really was a game changer for that company. Is like we could finally at least provide a solution that could meet the customer's needs. And we never were really good with partial home backup. You'd always end up losing money moving loads around and doing a bunch of electrical work. So it kind of got to the point where we just offered whole home backup only Tesla Powerwall 2s, and you could just kind of stack them out, back up the whole service, and kind of be in and out and provide a solution, that met their needs.
Yeah.
And then so I guess what I'm getting at is I don't have a lot of background in like the DIY space or a lot of the off-grid stuff. I know my stuff when it comes to grid tied and hybrid, but when it comes to off-grid, I don't really, that's where I have work. But kind of what I've seen in the mainstream solar and storage space is all the real successful products over the last several years kind of have that architecture of inverter, MID, battery.
Yeah.
It's going to be like Tesla Powerwall with the gateway, Enphase with the IQ system controller, Solar Edge with the backup interface. We got Franklin with the A-Power and the A-Gate-X. And what I'm getting at here, so out of all of those, I love Franklin the best. Now they don't do solar, so you kind of have to pair it with third-party solar.
Yeah.
Their microgrid interconnect device, that they nailed it, right? And kind of what I'm seeing here is until the release here of the GridBoss, my opinion was they had the best microgrid interconnect device on the market. And I haven't seen yours uh in action. I do have one in the basement, like I was saying right before we started. I'm getting ready to install this system myself, but from what I'm seeing from the instruction manuals and the data sheets and guides, like at face value, this looks like the best MID on the market today. You've got your 200 amp pass through. That kind of gets you out of all these code requirements you got to deal with when connecting stuff on the load side of the service. You've got your smart ports, which are more and larger than anything on the market. You got a one at 125 amp, one at 80 amp, two at 60 amps. No other competitor that I've seen has anything that can match that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop talking for a second. Tell us more about the smart ports and the features that they offer on the GridBoss.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and present a browser that I've got here that's got a bunch of different product specs and everything else. So I'm going to try to add that to our. I'm going to try to add that to our setup here. Present, share. Let me see if I can share a window. Yeah, okay. All right. All right, Graham, can you see this window?
Absolutely.
Okay, so starting with the 18K PV and some system wiring logic that we can compare and contrast. And then if you talk about the GridBoss, we have that here. So if you're talking about the logic that we have here, gosh, I wish they had set this website up where the picture explodes. Give me a second here. So yeah, the smart port logic, we have 4 smart ports and a generator port. So the smart ports, there's a 125 amp, an 80 amp, a 60 amp, and a 60 amp. And I think like you can buy a Savant system or any system that would go with this, and you can do you can put breakers and everything, but that's thousands of dollars on the system and a completely separate app to set up. And then there's the generator integration as well, which is a 125 amp breaker and does up to a 30 kilowatt generator. On the smart port side, the 260s, our objective there is there's several different reasons why an installer would use a smart port system. Unless you want to burden every job with a span or like a whole house breaker panel, we think that these 4 heavy circuits will actually solve the problem. You have your biggest enemies are the electric furnace. If you're talking about you might want to try to get away with a single inverter versus more than one, then I would probably put if you have an electric water heater, I'd say that's a really good candidate for a peak watt shaving solution because of peak watt surges are typically a minute or two if you've got a marginally close setup. So that's 5,000 watts. You can kind of shift on or off resistive load. No one cares. You could also pick things like a pool pump. The other 2 breakers, the 80 amp is meant for up to the largest EV charger. And that I think can work with several different pieces of logic, like battery state of charge. Do we back it up at all? If we back it up, do we only back it up if solar is available? Do we only back it up if the battery's at a certain percentage state of charge? And what's that load? And then also the peak wattage control that you might put on that as well. So I think that integrating into your logic on the backup system, and then 125 amp circuit breaker is really there to support sub panels like garages, sheds, shops, things outside as an additional option. So what I came to understand when I did install starting back in 2015 on the battery side with Outback and Schneider, right, was that your customer is going to probably make a bunch of promises the day that they get the deal that, oh, I'll control the use here, I'll stop this, and you just can't even set them up for that because the average end user, number one, what happens when the house sells, but even among them, they're in a backup situation, they're too stressed to remember all those different rules. So you have to go with some kind of a smart load solution to protect your battery capacity is one solution. There is really no world where anyone gets a battery backup that works great with an electric heat resistance furnace. You can do a heat pump, but you can't really run those backup heat strips as a backup strategy. And then you might have aspects of like deprioritizing pool pumps and EVs, and then also you have, I think, in terms of the peak wattage surge, if the person hasn't changed their electric water heater to a heat pump water heater, which is I think the most off-grid friendly solution out there and pays for itself in 2 years. I mean, come on, let's do that. But if they haven't done that, then I would put that water heater there as well in terms of making sure that the peak trip is never contributed by something benign as a water tank that can turn on a minute later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to second that idea about the heat strip. So, again, the company I used to work for, we installed Tesla Powerwalls all over Western North Carolina. And I remember in the middle of winter, we had a big storm that came through, knocked down a bunch of power lines. And, I had like over 10 people call me that night because their system wasn't working and they couldn't figure why the system, all the light, everything would shut down. 5 minutes later, everything would try to come back on. It would shut down again. And people just freak out and they get confused and they don't know why their system's not working. And then the system just shuts down, leaving them sitting there in the dark, confused why they don't have battery backup. And they're sitting there with a full battery bank. And it's just that their electric heat strips are trying to kick on as soon as the power comes back on, and it just keeps shedding, taking the system out.
And in the install business, like we've already crossed a threshold of complexity explanation to the customer is you just done wrong, right? At this point, you just sold them a bad backup system at this point in the conversation. Like, you've gotten
Yeah.
too technical with them. And then that's one of the things where I think anybody installing a backup system is going to need to put one of those in. So we were like, heck, let's figure out how to, it's cheaper for us to put one in the first place. And if people get it and they don't use it on day one, trust us, they'll really be glad they have it sitting there when that kind of situation happens and they realized, oh, that's what that's for.
Yeah.
That's the, I think it was just standard enough, and I was like, hey, let's just build a board that has all these different relays built in and go through UL testing and get that done.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Um, can you clarify now? I've seen some little illustrations on your data sheet. Do you have CG clamps built in throughout the GridBoss?
Yeah, all of it, you're supposed to just run your house through there, but the CTs inside the GridBoss are all set up the way that, yeah, they're intended to for monitoring the whole house power flow.
Gotcha. Now, what I will say is I love that because what I see, in my experience in the industry is CT installation is pretty much the biggest installer error. It just wreaks havoc on the system. The batteries are charging and discharging when they shouldn't be. Installers just don't, there's just so many ways to install CTs wrong. You can put them in the wrong location. You can have reverse polarity. You can install them on the wrong phases. And just having those built-in CTs, I mean, that's great because that just right there eliminates a lot of room for error right off the get-go.
Absolutely. So that's an aspect we had covered with this as well. And I think when we look at the wiring diagram on the FlexBoss and the GridBoss wiring system, there's also, when you said 200 amp pass through, there's also a 200 amp bypassed lug set that allows for us to deal with a 200 amp breaker panel that's not backed up
Yeah.
as well. So we put that built in into the process, and then we built in a this yellow plate right here. Yellow stickered plate is the bypass plate. So if anybody's asking, and those are two UL breakers under it, if anyone's asking, hey, how do I bypass the system? Just literally, it's only copper and breakers, and the house has power until it can be worked on, or you can replace the inverter, etc. So that's one other thing we worked in here to try to get rid of the cost of the 200 amp transfer switch, which is the ugliest sin in a grand.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely, man. Having that big non-backed up pass through too. Again, it's crucial to not have to install external CTs upstream of the MID anywhere.
Yeah.
So you just instead install everything downstream, let the grid boss kind of be the boss of the system.
Yeah, and that's the key thing on the, but now that being said, the max input is 200 amps. This hole right here, which will have a cover on it when you get it, is for an Eaton 200 amp main entrance breaker. It's about $150. Some people already have main entrance, service entrance rated disconnects, breakers, etc. on their home. So we were just like, hey, we don't want to burden the price tag of the unit with that, but it uses a standardized breaker that any electric store is gonna have.
Yeah. Okay, so for like connecting a hybrid inverter to the hybrid ports there, does each port have built-in production CTs as well, or how does the production monitoring work there? Do you know?
Yeah. So the production monitoring, we do have CTs on each of the ports.
Okay, great.
So the key thing with that is, if you notice, there's only one breaker per inverter.
Hmm.
So since we're, kind of diving into the whole logic around the grid boss, one breaker per inverter, the inverter shares the same line for input and output. So in grid connected mode, it's using the line, and in grid backup mode, it's using the same line. It's just changing its mode in sync with the grid boss within a 10 millisecond envelope.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Um, so let's see. For AC coupling, then we would be landing in the smart ports or in the hybrid ports. Can you sorry if I should already know this, but
AC coupling, that's a really good question. So we have a service pack release on the inverters that we're working on. It's not out yet, but actually our objective for AC coupling is not to land it on the grid boss. You can, all four of those will work for AC coupling, but there's a problem if you don't have DC coupled as well on your system. If you're an only AC, exclusively AC coupled system, like a retrofit, which I think the Powerwall 3 is not yet engaged in that business space yet, and so there are problems that you deal with, and it's the dark start problem.
Mhm.
Now, I think you might have experienced this if your background is the A gate from and the A power from Franklin, but I'm gonna go grab this wiring diagram. Okay. But what we're actually looking to do, when you see the FlexBoss inverter wiring into the EG to the GridBoss, it's going to wire through the grid port of the FlexBoss. So the FlexBoss works without the gateway. That's a key thing on our side. You can just buy it and build an off-grid system, and a lot of guys are going to do that because we have very good footprint in the off-grid side of the business. So it's one of these reasons why EG4 just kind of popped onto the installer scene in the last year, because we had all this volume under the waterline of the iceberg with the off-grid market. So we wanted to make the FlexBoss an off-grid leader, and it can stand alone, etc. So the grid port is used here. The load port stays live. And our current manual and documentation does not cover this. This is the thing that we're coming out with in the next month. And what we're going to try to do is actually put people's AC couple connection on the load port of
Gotcha.
the loss. And the reason
Okay.
is because what we can do in a 100% AC couple situation, where the problem is you have to keep your grid tie inverters live,
Mhm.
right? Is we can shed the GridBoss, and continue to power the load port up to 90 amps of service rating out that load port. So 20 kilowatts of grid tie. We can continue to power that system 24/7 with the idle wattage of the inverter. So when we get down, so that is, I think, the most seamless AC couple retrofit solution on the market right now.
Yeah,
Maybe the IQ, maybe the 5P if you're tying it with IQ8.
sure, sure. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, I'm not in an AC coupled situation, but that's a huge market share. I mean, there's so many people out there that have bought PV only grid tied systems over the years, and now either their utilities are phasing out net metering, and those plans are going away, or we're seeing a lot of um, utility outages due to natural disasters or just failing grids. Everybody just wants storage, and now it's actually you know attainable. Prices, the technology is just getting better, the prices are plummeting. So people that may have bought PV only 5 years ago, I think a lot of them are really going to be going storage.
Yeah, absolutely. And in those applications, since your background goes all the way back to the string inverter days, I think the Sunny Boy and Fronius guys are just going to land the DC into the DC inputs of an inverter like the FlexBoss. But the real holdouts are going to be your Solar Edge and In-Phase guys.
Yeah.
That's a real rework job to change a
Oh yeah.
micro system or change a Solar Edge system. So those people, if you're trying to sell a cost-effective battery system to them, or if you're a homeowner and you want to have a simple solution where you don't have to rewire that job that came with the house you bought or you guys put in years back, this really solves the AC couple problems. One of the key problems, I think we solved about 4 or 5 really important problems for battery storage that hybrid inverters were dogged by with this launch.
Yeah. Cool. So for the AC coupling feature, that is soon to be released, or is that something that's
That's this month. That's this
okay?
month. Yeah.
Great. Cool. Yeah, I'll be keeping my eyes open. Maybe I'll do some more content when it comes out.
Okay.
Um, let's see. Generators. So I personally had a customer recently that integrated like a little standby generator with this Franklin system. And it we had some issues there. Mainly the generator was undersized and it was kind of, dirty power. I was reading through your generator integration and guidelines here. Um, so the guidance that I'm seeing is that we want the generator size 1.5 times the size of the inverters on site. And that is to cover both the loads and charge the batteries. So, I guess whatever the batteries are dying or hit a low state of charge, we need to, and the home is running, right? We need a generator that can both run the home loads and charge the batteries. Um, so is there something I'm missing there other than that for the size restriction? How strict is that size restriction? I know we do have some other generator options,
Yeah.
but maybe
So
a little more in depth.
really, I think when we dropped this and we started talking about it, that's the conservative number we're putting in a manual. I think one of the cool things about the GridBoss and FlexBoss system is that it actually does have a generator boost function. Now the problem is that if we're talking about a Predator 7200 watt generator that you spent $600 for, that's only going to be so clean. So I think we probably are going to have a section for undersized generators, how to make them work and what to expect, because it's not going to be perfect in terms of load quality. You're like if you tell a customer you can do it, that's great, but the reality is also going to be that they might have flickering lights while they do it, because we're trying to clean up the mess coming out of the less than $1,000 generator. The holy grail in backup is to get people to stop wasting money on really expensive generators they're only going to put 50 hours on or 100 hours on the entire life, and spend that money on more batteries. I mean, golly, when you talk about an installed 22 kilowatt generator, which is a lot of what homes will need, like that, you could buy, the average homeowner, if you're doing like an install price, can install 2 more of our battery packs at least.
Yeah.
Typically our turnkey rates from our installers for less than that generator. I mean, which one are people really going to get more benefit out of?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's one thing I see with generators. It's great to have that additional redundancy for backup, but like the downside is they really provide no value whatsoever the 99% of the time that your grid is working. Whereas solar and batteries, you can be offsetting your utility bill and using them daily.
Okay. Yeah,
Um,
that's but you talk about the charge inverter or the other options for the small setup. I mean, the best solution is the charge inverter. Yeah, we really tried to keep that price as low as we could. And we're working on a remote start kit for cheap generators that come with cheap remote starts, like the Harbor Freight Predators and stuff like that. I'm very passionate about getting to a point where people don't have to buy that big of a generator
mhm.
and use as an augment versus, this whole institutional 12 grand part of a whole complete backup system. It's a waste of money.
Yeah. Yeah, agreed. I mean, most people that buy solar and batteries, if they want a little bit of generator backup, they don't really want to spend, another, you know, over $10,000 to get a backup generator that they're going to use occasionally. Um, so I don't know if we want to go into neutral to ground bonding with your generators. I know most permanent standby generators, large ones, don't have that neutral to ground bond because, it's assumed it's a permanent in place generator to serve a home that already has a neutral to ground bond. And we generally want to avoid a neutral to ground bond in more than one location. But a lot of these little cheap standby generators do have that neutral to ground bond. Um, any thoughts there on like, I guess essentially if we were probably using a small generator that had a neutral to ground bond, we'd probably be using the charge inverter regardless to connect it to your system.
Yeah, probably be using the charge inverter to connect to the system on the small generators. I mean, uh, oddly enough, the GridBoss can actually work with the Harbor Freight generator without the charge inverter.
Okay.
Um, Again, you're asking for it, like people are asking for it if they do it,
Yeah.
in terms of power quality issues. So I hate to be the one that goes and says, "Yeah, let's do it." But at the same time, the charge inverter solution, neutral ground bonds are relevant, and then obviously with the bigger generators. The key thing with us is clean generators, right? So if you're talking about a generator that's in the 2 grand range or less, and it's like a 10 kilowatt Generac or a Champion or something like that, and it's got a pretty clean ratio, the GridBoss can actually clean that up. So I think what we're going to try to do is differentiate. By the time that we've got our final generation manual on generators, I think we kind of started with the disclaimer sizing setup, and then we'll look at this high quality medium sized generator, and then we'll look at hardware sort generators.
Yeah. Yeah, sounds good. And just recommendation to anyone out there watching, if you do connect a cheap generator to your home, make sure you got some good surge protection installed in your backup panels and things of that nature, because again, I had a recent situation. Again, those cheap generators, you put them under too much load, they kind of, freak out and surge a bunch of dirty power into your home, and that can kind of cause some issues. So I had a question. So on the FlexBoss data sheet, I saw max AC input power of 12K, and I think this is something that I've got confused on in a past video. Now, is that AC charging? So if you're charging from the grid, is that what that value is pertaining to?
Max AC charging, charge from the grid's 12 kilowatts. Yes.
Gotcha. So yeah, that max AC input power, I think that's probably what
Well, with the input, we're putting the generator on the same bus as the entire house. So it's not going to the inverter first. It's going to, we're syncing up the generator and we're landing the generator's juice on the common AC bus. So when we talk about max input power, we should parenthesize that for battery use, when you use charging batteries per inverter. And then of course, if you hooked up a 22 kilowatt inverter generator, the power would actually go from the generator to the house first, and then to the inverter as the second one. And also the inverter would try to do corrective harmonic distortion, etc., on that generator's quality of power. So you would have 20 kilowatts from the generator, and actually you could recruit the inverter for more power, for actually 32, for instance, in that situation.
Gotcha. And that's what that generator boost function is if you want to use
Yeah.
generator and the inverter to power your home.
Exactly. The generator boost puts the generator on the bus first, and so the inverter maintains an inverter role. If there's enough drop in demand for power, then the generator starts feeding the battery, but at the same time, the inverter is still engaged to where it can jump in and augment. So if you turned on a 10 kilowatt generator and you've got a 20 kilowatt or a house that you were burning 16 kilowatts on before when you were using the FlexBoss, then what would happen is the 10 kilowatt generator, let's say your power is 3 kilowatts right now, when you turn it on, it would supply the 3 to the house and then put 7 in the battery bank. Now, when you go ahead and turn on another 10 kilowatts of loads, what would happen, instead of the generator going to its knees, what would happen is that the generator would contribute, I assume, up to 10 kilowatts, unless you set it to contribute even less, because of a lot of times you don't want to max out the contribution of a generator. I keep it about 80% or less. So what I would recommend, let's say it's a nameplate 10 kilowatt, I would recommend, for the purpose of having power quality, that you set it at 8. And so in that circumstance, you go from 3 to 13, the generator will now contribute another, let's say it was contributing 8 before. It had 3 going to the house, 5 to the batteries. And then in the case where 10 more kilowatts are turned on, the 5 go back to the house instead of the battery. So now 8 are being contributed from the generator. The remainder is 5 kilowatts, and that is being contributed by the inverter. So the inverter will sync up with it's ready to contribute up to its full capacity, 12 kilowatts from battery, 16 kilowatts when PV is available. And of course, 14 and a half for like 10 minutes from batteries.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds great. And so essentially, if you want it to function like that, you would want to program generator boost mode or boost function or something of that nature.
Yeah, it does have that. And that's kind of the specific aspect. Our initial 18 kPV, it's like the other 200 amp inverters on the market had one smart port, and it did like 4 things. And so you had to go back and change that. Now the generator port's a generator port.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. So another thing I was a little confused on. I believe the data sheets, I might get them backwards here, but in one area I'm seeing the FlexBoss has 12K output power in backup mode and 16K output in grid, like while connected to the grid, or all right. So data sheet says 12K output power and backup, 16K AC grid output, which insinuates we get an extra 4 when it's connected to the grid. But then I've heard other interviews and things where it says 12K with solar, 16K, or 12K without solar, aka like at night when the sun's not shining, 16 with solar. So what about with solar, but in backup mode. Are we
That's
limited?
16, yeah, that's 16 kilowatts.
Okay, so essentially, if the sun's shining, whether it's grid tied or backup, we got 16.
Yeah,
If the sun is not shining, we have 12K.
absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, great. Um, yeah, so I've seen in a recent video, it can start up to the FlexBoss can start up to a 5-ton AC. Most of those I think have an LRA around 150 amps or higher. In all of our manufacturers, I can never compare apples to apples. Like I think years ago, everybody called like a 3-second peak output and a 10-second peak output. Recently, people started displaying a 1-second peak output. Then a couple manufacturers started putting data sheets that said load start capabilities, X amount of amps. So kind of what's the max LRA we can, or the max peak, amperage or motor LRA that we can start with the FlexBoss system.
Yeah, so 190 rotor lock amps,
Okay.
and that should be more than enough to start a 5-ton air conditioner. Of course, people have. I think the other. I think there's when people say they can start air conditioners, a lot of them are in the 150 range, 170 range, and it's a little more marginal because some air conditioners depends on the pressure of the freon and some of that other stuff. So we're focused on making sure that we have more than enough rotor lock amps to start, and that's a fraction of a second, as you point out. I
Yeah.
think on the output data, we are at peak power. I think that's right over here in the manual. From peak power from batteries, 15 kilowatts for 6 minutes, 13.2 kilowatts for 12 minutes, right? And so those are some of the thing about the FlexBoss and the 18K. It's always been really remarkable is that we had these longer term surges. And when you go into a peak demand crisis where somebody's too much on, those tend to only last for a few minutes. I mean, if the customer's burning, to your point of furnace, if they're burning a lot of power, they're going to run out of juice pretty quick. If you're pulling tens of kilowatts for an hour, and solar's not available, there's an aspect to there that's problematic. So our battery surge, the significant, I think these two areas, the 15 and the 13, are very, very significant for people that have that might wonder if they should have a second inverter or not on the capacity side.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, 190 LRA, that's pretty much right up there at the top of the industry right now.
Absolutely. Okay.
Yeah, maybe go more and well, I want you to talk about what you want to, but yeah, 12,000 XP, that's what's on everybody's mind. That's a new product that just hit the shelves. Tell us a little more about that.
Well, I started actually before I was an installer. I started about about 3.5 years earlier than that as a do-it-yourselfer. So back when I was 15, I took my family off grid, and I've always started with and been very passionate about off-grid solar, which a lot of that's do-it-yourselfers, but it's people building power in remote areas, and it's um, a little less fine-tuned than the grid connected stuff. And so there's always this market for indoor rated electronics. And I think EG4 got into the indoor rated inverters before we actually built the hybrid flagship competitors where we thought we could really address the problems that people are facing with other hybrids in the business. So the 12,000 XP, the objective there is to create the package that everybody wants for an off-grid full-size home and do it in an indoor case and open ventilated, lower cost solution without all the grid hardware and do some cool stuff there. So previous to the 12,000 XP launch, the most popular off-grid inverter in America was the EG4 6000 XP. So that's a 6 kilowatt unit. I think you can contrast that with, and very quickly we paid attention to our customers on how they were using 6000 XP, and well, shockingly, they were buying 2 of them. Oh, it looks like I just got myself a beach ball. Shockingly, they were buying 2 of these. And so for us, it was like, okay, we need to figure out, and the 6000 XP is transformative. It's a $1,400 inverter that actually has generator boost, so you can use a cheap generator, I mean, at your own peril,
Yeah.
but you can use it and it can handle the generator boost aspect. Make sure you try to get a good quality one, but you can use a small generator. Of course, you can use a charge inverter, and it has arc fault protection, ground fault protection. I mean, this kind of package never had it that good when the 6000 XP came out. Built-in battery breaker, built-in solar switch, and people can afford a $1,400 package. So we were like, look, people are buying 2 of these, and they're having to buy an input breaker panel and an output breaker panel and try to phase match it. And then our technical support at Signature Solar, which is really the DIY support hub, is always going and counting phases with people and using ohm meters to make sure they did the right thing. So like, this is problematic. And so 6000 XP is absolutely great for the small homes, and it's great for people who really just want to have a redundant inverter. We're like, look, a lot of people are buying 4, and a lot of people are buying 2. Let's just build the bigger version, and let's make it a little bit better. So I'm going to actually share a little Easter egg we haven't yet announced, but it's already imminent. It's come out of R&D and was making the process for release. So the 12,000 XP is actually slightly more powerful than 2 6000 XPs. And here's how it is. When you have PV connected with the 12,000 XP, you are about to be able, with the latest firmware, to put out 15,000 watts AC. So 12,000 from up to 12,000 from the batteries and up to 15,000 from the PV. So that's going to be an incredible feature that we're giving for free via firmware update. So a little bit more power. The 2 6000 XPs are 12,000 watts each, so or 12,000 if you put 2 of those together. And we can't make that kind of upgrade on the 6000 XP, but we put more overhead on the 12,000 XP build. We also put a really sick inductor on the thing that can start a 5-ton air conditioner right out of the box. So there were people who were just like, heck, I'm done with the grid. I just want to, I'll use it to power my charge inverter, and I'm going to run my whole house in backup, and they're in unregulated areas, and they can do that. So the idea with the 12,000 XP is, look, you could buy the FlexBoss, and I really recommend it if you're talking about a long-term investment solution. It's got a 10-year warranty. It's got more power output, etc. But if you're just trying to do the most cost-effective off-grid project and you want to upgrade technology, 5-10 years from now, and you have a good indoor spot, the 12,000 XP is $2,500 retail. So that was a cost savings to our customers of at least $500 on the project if you factor in the input and output breaker panels. The other thing we were able to do with it was we were able to put in a smart load breaker, which allowed for AC coupling, smart loads, so it's kind of like the 18 kPV setup, but it's just much less expensive, and it just depends on what people want to do. I mean, I've watched the industry mature a lot in the last 5 years, and if you're building to tinker, then you could do a 12,000 XP and come back mid-range 5-7 years, 10 years from now. It's got a 5-year warranty. The lifespan is dependent. It's open vented, so the lifespan is dependent on the climate you put it in. If you're in the bayous in Louisiana and it's drinking fog every day, it's gonna fail faster.
Yeah.
So and of course the 6,000 and 12,000 XP also are and the FlexBoss are really they have this relationship with our batteries where you can monitor the batteries remotely and update firmware remotely. You have basically got all of your monitoring stuff in one spot. And that was another thing that just really integrates well with the EG4 battery pricing, the UL certifications, and now I think the increased value that we provide with the 12,000 XP. It's been a rock star product for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I can see why. There's really, I don't see too many competitors really that can offer anything better than that for what you've got. Let's see. Do you want to talk about the 18K at all? I mean, I know that's been around for a while. A lot of people watching are probably familiar with
our
that.
push for people with the 18K is to get away from those in general. And it's not like we're discontinuing them. We're going to continue to carry those units, so people won't have any problem getting them. But what we want to do is really, I think in every case where a person is looking at building a new system, there really is no reason to start with the 18 kPV unless you're just trying to duplicate, etc. I think we might end up with some sales coming up, or we might end up, some price reductions on the unit as we kind of scale it a little bit down. The FlexBoss is meant to actually augment the 18 kPV, and we've got a good roadmap coming out for if you own an 18 kPV, here's how you integrate a FlexBoss into it as your second inverter. actually in a way that saves you a lot of money with the parallel problem that you have adding a second 200 amp inverter. So the 18 kPV had a set of hindrances that all 200 amp inverters have. So obviously we're in a competitive landscape on the 200 amp inverters. A bunch more Chinese companies came to the market, Chinese label companies. Obviously our initial designs from China, just like the other competitor out of Ningbo that does solar. So we, the Doya guys are great. They do our air conditioners. So we've tried to, bring a core design, adjust it, fix it, stabilize it. And that's what I think everybody has done in the market. We've just been very open with it, with the credits we gave to Lux Power on our setup. But I think with the 200 amp structure, it just the new setup that we have with the Flexboss and GridBoss solves so many problems. So I would say here's 4 use cases, there's 4 people. And this is why you really need to think about just going Flexboss or GridBoss, either way. If you're an off-grid person looking for a long-term inverter that'll last you over 10 years and be really powerful, just buy the Flexboss. It's cheaper. It doesn't have a 200 amp transfer switch. You don't need one. You're off-grid, right? So save the money, get the more powerful inverter, and be happy. It's great opportunity there. Better surge, better PV input capacity, and better AC output when PV is available. So that customer, no reason to buy an 18 kPV. The customers that want to put in a second could potentially want a second inverter in the future, upgrade with the 18 kPV is if you're going to hook up. I only back up here. If you're going to hook up to the grid at all, the math around the GridBoss was what's the most we could give a customer for less than the cost of the 2 grid interconnection devices you have to have on the 18 kPV, the 200 amp inverter that we've got. You've got to buy, if you interconnect this properly, and let me know if you think this is different, you've got to buy a 200 amp transfer switch, bypass switch, and you've got to buy a 200 amp fuse disconnect for the input side. So, and you got to buy all the 3-aught wiring and conduit and take that on the wall. All the installers I know, even the most hardcore ones, say that's a $2,000 minimum. So we said, let's build a box that can retail for under $2,000 and do the most we can for the customer. That's why we put the load shedder in there, and really we're able to add a lot of different functionality to it, because we were like, you're already spending this. So if you are somebody who is hooking up to the grid for any reason, and then we'll jump into, I think, the applications where this dominates, the GridBoss is already paid for. You're just not doing your math at the electrical store if you don't see that, right? So the GridBoss is free compared to what you're going to pay for the 200 amp switch and the 200 amp bypass. That's a fact. And additionally, remember, you saved, from a retail standpoint, you saved $700 on the Flexboss. So it's better than free. You spent $700 less getting a more powerful inverter, and the GridBoss is less than what you'll pay at the hardware store. So that's, I think, just the overall blanket. But there's actually a stacked dominant structure here, because let's just say the interconnection value is $2,000, okay? And then we got to talk about some of the application values. The parallel inverter guys. I'm going to go and grab the 18K parallel wiring guide that we have. And the problem I've got here, here's a 3 inverter setup. You have now got to buy 3 parallel breaker panels, 1 for generator, 1 for grid, and 1 for output. Well, I mean, those are $200 panels. And so if you're thinking about going from 1 inverter to 2 inverters ever in the future, you're going to have to cut power to your house, disconnect all that 200 amp wiring, install 2 input and output breaker panels, and buy a bunch of 100 amp breakers, which are what, $100 each, 4 of them. So that's $400 plus the $400 of breaker panels, plus all the wiring, $1,000 minimum, and at least 4 hours of your time if you're a good electrician, and you've hung your second inverter. Good job. With the GridBoss, I mean, it's a totally different world. You want to hang a second Flexboss inverter? Well, just hang it and put it on breaker 2. So that is now less than an hour job, no money at the wire store, another $1,000 in your pocket. But don't forget, you saved an additional $700 on that second Flexboss. So, the winnings here just stacked up another $1,700 for anyone who's looking for a 2 inverter system. Now we've got a really cool application coming for people who have 18Ks installed, showing them how to add a Flexboss to that 18K and use the existing 200 amp hardware without having to buy all that parallel stuff with the Flexboss inverter. So the Flexboss system is to build on the 18K PV, not turn the 18K PV into a defunct product. So we're going to build around the customers who've already invested in us because of the success of the 18K PV. So we're excited about releasing that function as well, and just a white paper as to how to add a Flexboss convenient. I think we'll even do a video on our YouTube channel with our R&D team. We've already got that in place. So the parallel customers, you've got that problem solved. The next problem, and this goes back to the core aspect of this design. Remember how we said we use one wire, which carries 70 amps from the inverter to the GridBoss. There's only one ironclad fact in low voltage battery banks, and that is the inverter must be right next to the battery. You're not going to run 48 volt DC any amount of length, okay? So customers do not want their battery banks always chained to the meter. The problem with the 200 amp integrated inverter is that you put you kind of married your 200 amp switch gear to your inverter. So now if a customer wants to put the battery bank on the other corner of their house, or in the shop behind the house, or under a ground mount outside of the house, they have got to run double 200 amp service. So this is where we focus the product, designing around all the costs around the inverter. We did a much better job. We did a good second generation job on the inverter, but we also went and attacked the surrounding cost. So if you think about someone who's long distance, you're running double 3-aught runs in 2-inch EMT. I mean, you're an electrician, you get the problem here, right? That could be $5,000 plus to put the system where the homeowner wants it, versus you could just run a 70 amp service with a number 4 copper, 100 and some feet, and you'd be just fine. And use a shielded Cat 5 cable. So to go back to the GridBoss, so people can put their systems where they want them now. Technically, if you want to use, in a more extreme case, you could go more than 100 feet with a converter box to aluminum URD outside of there. So as long as you have a breaker conversion on that, we're not yet inviting aluminum into our setup just because we have a lot of new electricians and tradespeople that have just gotten their license, and a lot of them don't know how to deal with aluminum. I think it was a question you mentioned you might be interested in asking, and I think that's another thing. But actually, I see this as an opportunity on the long distance side. So the long distance problem, we solved that, and that's something I'm very excited about. Because I think that the Flexboss, if you just do that for one Flexboss, the Flexboss is big enough for probably 90% of homes in terms of inverter capacity. So a single run of AC wire, now we can put batteries wherever we want them. If a Powerwall 3 or an A-gate, you might have to do double runs of AC. They're better. And of course, with our 200 amp style inverters and all of our 200 amp competitors, you're spending, holy heck at the electrical store. So that was a huge change. So the parallel problem, we've got that solved. The parallel problem, the long distance problem, we also solved on the AC couple side with this circuit that I'm showing you. When we'll have this out, but the next thing that we're going to announce is the dark start. And that's, I think by the time this video is posted, we'll probably have that clear and announced. But that is something where you just you're just not going to have the other 200 amp inverters and backup stuff. They have the dark start problem. You've probably run into this where the house runs out of juice and it's only got an AC couple power source. How do I get that thing to restart? Unfortunately, that typically is a manual process. So it hit the reserve, and now we've got to go and manually try to turn that on in the morning, and please don't run your house while we're recharging the batteries. Oh shoot, they did. Now we got to send jumper kit. It's a disaster. It's got to be fully automatic, and that's what we were able to achieve with the splitting out the 200 amp solution, is that we could actually dedicated power the AC couple solution there. So we solved the AC couple problem as well. And then the other problem was this whole load shedder integration. You should put a load shedder on the system. And the problem is, do I want to learn some third-party solution and pay all that money? You already paid for one when you paid us for the GridBoss. So the load shedder problem was solved, and that's a key thing for this business. So you think about if you've got a customer that say is going to buy 2 inverters, and they save the $1,700 on the parallel aspect to this, the potential savings of the FlexBoss can get into way up there in the almost 10,000 range, you know, because they saved, oh shoot, sorry, they save the $2,000 interconnection costs, they save the $1,700 of parallel cost, you know, they could save the distance cost if the customer wants that to go somewhere, and they save, let's just say, $2,000 of, you know, third-party load shedding solution cost. So not to mention, you know, span is, I think, kind of the default, which is a lot more than that. So I mean, where I'm seeing this is we're right there pushing $6,000-7,000 and potentially more in some applications, and the functionality here is all integrated.
Yeah, yeah, I couldn't agree more. Love what you're doing, and really see like all these great features and bells and whistles, and just having a just lower overall cost than really any of the other solutions out there.
Yeah.
Um, so I had a question. So I think a lot of people get confused, and I think even I may be a little confused here. So a grid-tied inverter set to zero export versus an off-grid inverter connected to the grid. Am I correct that the main difference here is that grid-tied or hybrid, that hybrid inverter, I guess I should say, connected or to the grid, but set to zero export? You know, it's kind of able to use all power and kind of like manage that intersection of power, whether it be grid, solar, batteries, or whatever. While an off-grid inverter is physically going to, it's never going to be truly paralleled with the grid. It's only going to be running on solar or batteries or transferring over to grid, and it's never going to have all those three kind of intersecting together. Is that accurate?
Yeah, yeah, the off-grid inverter, the grid's just essentially a generator. It's not going to be able to do the intersection aspect, and also, and also, you know, I think some of the grid companies are now integrating VPP solutions that are getting more and more accessible to us. We're on some small ones, but we're trying to go a much bigger scale in 2025. So obviously, we've got the hardware, and just all the raw megawatt hours per month installed is just killer with EG4. So we've got some great partnerships coming on the VPP side.
Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward to learning about that, because I mean that's really the way a lot of these things are going. The grid needs help. A lot of people are able to participate in these virtual power plant programs and get bill credits or good incentives. So yeah, I think that would be one thing that could bring, you know, obviously EG4, um, you know, uh, you're already competing with the competition at a great level, but if you were able to participate in those programs as well, I just think,
Yeah.
you know, it would be like nobody else would touch you. Um, in terms of, so yeah, fun fact, like here in my area of the country, we do have a VPP program, the Duke Power Pair rebate. You know, you get up to $9,000 for participating. You know, if you get a appropriate size solar and storage system, it does have to be, you know, obviously off the approved list. But even with that $9,000 rebate, um, you know, a matched EG4 system pretty much
Yeah.
equals a competitor system with that rebate. So that just shows like um how much money is savings there. You know, EG4 just how do you do it? I mean, it's a strong inverter, the smart loads, the lithium iron phosphate batteries. You know, your prices just beat basically everyone in the industry. You know, just wondering how you achieve that.
Yeah, so the key thing has been, you know, we really we grabbed volume, and we built a volume value based model. You know, I think that there are a lot of other business models where they kind of get the pros first, and they basically figure out what's the most money we can milk from the customer, and that's their price tag. Our goal is, as we have scaled the entire time for the last 5 years, is as our volume goes up, as our reliability has gone up, it's been a matter of how do we deliver a lower and lower cost to the customer. And it just comes down to the whole ethos of the company and our mission in business as is.
Cool. Yeah, I guess just any other products you want to talk about? Anything coming in the future of EG4 as far as what does the future hold with your vision of the company?
Yeah. I think EG4, the big picture, and we've got kind of just a ruined mentality where we started out in rural United States, small town areas where basically solar is low penetration, and people, the people we've all sold to are the people that have said no to solar already. And so our vision is to create a hardware ecosystem, and continue to support one going forward that makes solar just a mindlessly simple decision for people who have already said no to solar. And when that's done, we will have felt like we have done our job in the market. We want it to be the default choice, the personal computer revolution of solar, that we need to change what we have been doing, and we need to get to a point where hardware innovation makes it stupid to not go solar, and it's just a general default. When we've done that, every step we can take in that direction is a win for us that we really see over here at the company. And when we've done that, we'll feel like we've kind of achieved our mission in business. That I think just, personally, I was just somebody who was installing who felt like it wasn't going to happen soon enough.
Yeah, totally. So you gave us a little bit about your background, kind of how you got started. But just kind of, like I'm always interested in how people get to where they are and how they achieve success. Kind of what was your kind of like upbringing like, your background, your work life? How did that lead to who you are and where the company stands today? What's the secret to your success? I mean, for basically 4 years in the industry, and EG4 is really just taken the industry by storm. And lastly, what is the legacy that you would like to leave behind?
Yeah, those are some deeper questions, but definitely, something that I try to keep in view when I'm coming to work. My upbringing, I've got 9 siblings, and I was one of these kids that got the opportunity to be homeschooled with pros and cons to that. And so I think my background was learning how to navigate essentially a tribe of kids and learning how to share, like living in a place where you can't be a selfish narcissist because if you're in a glass house. I was joking with someone the other day about it. I was like, hey, we did fight a lot, but there was essentially like a ceiling on the kinds of fight we would start. Like you could not throw hard objects at people because if once you started that, we would all self-regulate and get you in trouble because we don't want to live in a place where people are throwing hard objects at people. And that was just like a funny default thing with that experience. This is a really cool, crazy background that I had. That really taught me a few things about collaboration. When you can get an idea that changes the whole picture, those are the ideas you go after. You get an idea that creates more value than everyone thinks they have in total before. And when you are willing to share with other people, share the credit, share collaborative benefit, when you can figure out how to do that in the industry, and really just believe in the people you're serving. That was a big deal for me. So walking out of that with, I think one experience we had when I was young, we lost power for 3 weeks with Hurricane Ike down in Houston. And I was like 14, and I told my parents I would figure it out by the time we had the next hurricane. We'd have a backup system, and generators were stupid because they were stuck investments. So I just took that kind of personality and I threw at the idea of making your own power in a space that I thought was, hey, the components were innovating faster than or as fast as the PC revolution had in the early days. In terms of like success in a short time, number one, if we hadn't been successful and someone else had taken our ideas and done them better, it would almost be just flattering and just fulfilling. For me, I just frankly chased the big idea, which is I want solar to compete against the grid. I didn't really care about competing against the other hardware companies. I wanted solar to compete against the real alternative and build hardware that helps win that argument, that helps win that arm wrestle. So I think aiming higher than just direct competition kind of helped me create extreme competition products. But the real competition I'm locked in with is some power co-op that thinks they're the only option and can tell people whatever they want to do, or and their rates go up. Well, okay, we need to live in a world where people have a better alternative, and we need to do the best job we can creating that. So I aimed a little higher than direct competition. Legacy left behind, I'm really somebody who doesn't have to get credit for what I do. I think we let some of the marketing team leak some of the work that I'm doing in East Africa with water well charities. Turns out batteries can actually really change village wells in a way that nobody thought in that field, because they're a little, the technical expertise is a little lacking in some of those cases. I'm just ultimately, my own personal background religiously, I'm a Christian. I'm somebody who kind of gave myself over to Jesus, and I'm willing to accept just praising and referencing the Spirit of God that He gave us all. So I'm okay leaving a legacy on the table and just telling people, go look at what Jesus said and see if that's right for you. So I don't really bother myself with that. I try to just bother myself with becoming more that way. I know that's a little bit open, but I honestly just don't have a legacy bookshelf. I made some spiritual decisions that put me in that direction. And, I think that's really where I hope to end up, as just someone who loves all humanity, tries to contribute, and tries to fix my mistakes as I go.
Yeah, it sounds great. I think that's all you can do in this world. We're all imperfect people, just trying our best to provide value for society and live together. And yeah, anything you can do to benefit other people is just provide value. I think that's really what it's all about. So I know we're here. We're probably about an hour in. I haven't been keeping track perfectly, but is there anything else you want to say before we leave the interview?
No, I think we keep a really good top level view of a lot of this stuff here. And when you dive in on the FlexBoss, maybe we can have a conversation about simplifying the install, and just kind of I'm sure we'll kind of work through all the different rabbit holes we can go in with that hardware. And just remember that I'd love to do a follow-up, just remembering that, hey, the stuff is just recently out. It's got all the power and capabilities, but I think our quick starts are going to get better and better as we go.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to installing mine. I have this dingy, dark basement, and so I had to rip down a bunch of shelves and clean it up and paint the wall, everything. It just looked too pretty to put in that dirty basement. So here in the next couple weeks, I'm going to make some good content doing the GridBoss FlexBoss combo with some indoor wall mount batteries, and I'd love to meet up during that process or after and continue this this talk. It's great having you on the show today, James. I really appreciate it.
Yes. Thanks, Graham. I'm going to run too. I think I've got somebody beating down my door now. So you have a great day, and we'll love to follow up on that FlexBoss install.
Perfect. Take care, James.
Thank you. Bye-bye.